I'd like to thank the panel for not only for your contributions this morning, but for coming back this afternoon to answer the questions and feel the fire from the floor. Hopefully it won't be too much for you all. So thanks everybody who put in questions into the question box. There have been a few sort of themes that have come out of that. I will try with Angus here, who's going to ably assist me, to get around those themes. If I don't get around to your specific question, then hopefully it will be covered. But if you feel that it hasn't been covered, then we do have a roving mic which we can, or you can, it's a small enough room if you've got a loud voice, I'm sure you can ask a question. What shall we start with? Shall we start with some really easy ones then? There was quite a few questions around data and around how things are monitored. So I think this is largely for the water companies. So questions around, and the Environment Agency as well, Colin. So a couple of them, I'll sort of reel them off and you can try and answer. So other than power outages, why do dry spills occur? What are water companies doing to compensate for historical legacy of illegal sewage outflows? Do live data platforms disclose if a spill is illegal? Then we have things around, do the water companies have an idea how accurate their storm discharge system is? Has it been independently assessed? And what are the current data targets for good river health? So I don't know if somebody wants to start on that one. Matt, you were making some notes. Do you want to start on a couple of those?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So the first question was about dry day spills and what's the main cause. Certainly in this particular area, groundwater inundation is the biggest cause. Those are the overflows that discharge for the longest amount of time. That's because when the groundwater table comes up, it stays up. It's much longer than a rainfall event. And that will be the biggest factor causing dry day spills. So you'll get spills from an overflow that last many days, weeks, months after the groundwater table has come up.
Can I make a build and pick up something Ash said earlier? Ash is quite right in the assertion about those being illegal. It's not in our permit. The infiltration is not in our permit. And at the moment, there is quite a productive debate going on with the Environment Agency to look at those companies where we are impacted quite significantly by groundwater, so that actually we can take a view potentially as to the catchment drain down time, so that actually we can potentially get a more representative calculation of a dry day spill. Because the way it is at the moment defined, which is not completely finite yet, because we're still working on that definition, does mean that for those of us with groundwater impacted systems, which includes our business, Wessex Water, and Southern Water, and Anglian predominantly, we potentially will be at risk of seeing a large number of dry day discharges which are actually related to infiltration. But just as an additional build, we mentioned power, but also we need to admit, when equipment failure happens. So if we do have an equipment failure, which means that we have to discharge into our storm tanks earlier than we're permitted to do, that would also constitute a dry day spill. And it would be remiss of me to sit here and go, that never happens, because it does happen. So it could be due to a power failure, it could be due to equipment issues, and it could also in this area be due to infiltration. So just to put that on the table.
So could I just clarify then? Are you saying that you think you get badly done by in the calculation of how many dry spills you've made, as in the illegal spills, or there's a way to reduce that number. But why?
I don't think it's a way to reduce it necessarily. I think it's just a way to categorise it correctly according to the geological conditions that we exist within, recognising that infiltration does have an impact on our works. And that's what we're working with the agency on at the moment. The agency may well say, when we complete the task and finish work, that is not the case, and we have to abide by the 0.25 millimetres of rain within the last 24 hours. If that's the judgment, then that's the judgment. But at the moment, what we're doing is we're having an open discussion about whether the catchment drain down time does have an effect.
Well, I really hope they don't let you off that, because that's the law. And I think that other point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, 0.25 of a millimetre of rain is what they're allowed. They're calling that a wet day. 0.25, a quarter of a millimetre of rain is enough to excuse the water company for polluting. Now that I find that astonishing. I'm not even sure what a quarter of a millimetre of rain looks like kind of just a light sweat. So that's the position we're at, and I think there's a long way to go, and it'd be disappointing if Thames Water wanted to haggle over trying to make law breaking not law breaking.
Colin, did you have anything you want to add into that?
Well, thank you, Lisa. I think it's important to recognise that when we are looking at issues in terms of a national issues, it's different from a local issue, which we're here talking about the local issue around Cotswolds. So the discussions in terms of the totality of the issue about groundwater infiltration is key. But, Thames Water does have groundwater infiltration plans. Those plans have identified areas where they need to make investment in to minimise that amount of infiltration. So, from our perspective, to get away from illegal or 0.25 mil or whatever, Thames Water needs to reduce the amount of infiltration into that network, because that will reduce the volume of wastewater going into sewage treatment works. And that is the outcome that we want to see achieved, is to minimise that. It takes investment, it takes different ways of thinking, and I know, Tess, you gave an example about relining and manhole covers and such like. That's a start. From our perspective, that momentum needs to be accelerated.
Yes, Matt, I want to come back in.
Just really interesting is that because it's a collecting system, and most of the pipes are at the top end of a collecting system, a study finished this year showed that about 70% of the length of pipes are in private ownership and 30% are in water company ownership. So we don't know where 70% of those pipes are. They belong to customers. If you picture a tree in the winter, the length of the twigs is generally, it's what the private drainage is, and then the water company will own the branches and the trunk. So that's not saying that we're not responsible. What we're saying is that the cord, fixing it is not easy when you don't own most of the assets that might or might not be causing the problem. So it is a lot trickier than just saying, water companies seal your sewers. We also need to go further up the system and seal other people's as well.
There was another point that you raised about accuracy of storm discharge data.
Yes, and I guess somebody else has said, why is it so crudely measured? An event is vaguely defined and the impact is not included.
Yeah, I guess I would offer that to Ash actually, because we've been very open with our data, and I think you'd be very open with us if you found that it was inaccurate. And so I think that's one of the benefits of having the data very open and having it very transparent, because we may well believe that it shows the right information. We feel confident about that. But what we also believe is that we would be told quite quickly if we didn't feel that it was representative.
Yeah, and there has been some work done by my colleague Peter Hammond, who's established that there is a massive inaccuracy in the reporting. Sometimes it's false positives, sometimes false negatives. And that is... that's an issue. I think we've even seen excuses from, I think it's from Water UK, that the industry didn't intend the system to be used to measure pollution in this way. I don't know why they would want a system that wasn't accurate, but there are serious. I think there are serious questions about the accuracy. What we are really, we're lucky, I think, to have been able to do this piece of work with Thames Water, because Thames Water did take the attitude that they would not hide, they would not. It hasn't all been smooth sailing, right? But after a few battles and whatever, we've got a reasonable arrangement now, and so that's the way to make progress. And that's not the case with all companies. Wessex is good. Wessex has been exceptionally good in being accurate. I think you even provide on your website data about groundwater infiltration being responsible. I don't think you say, oh, by the way, we're breaking a law, which I think perhaps you should. But
It's not for me to say, actually.
but they do.
I brought some with me, actually.
Got some groundwater.
I brought some sewage from our biggest dry day spilling. Would you like to see it?
No.
No?
Actually, the only one that said no.
Well,
You've got to think about what you've just
oh,
said.
yes. Oh. We've got props.
So this is from Chiverton. If you go into YouTube and type Chiverton, Shrewton, there's a video of me showing everyone this dry day spill. It's spilt for 70% of 2023, so 6,720 years it was discharging. Now this goes through a settlement tank and then through a reed bed.
Hours.
Hours. 70% of the year it was discharging, but although it's in the headlines, this is raw sewage being dumped. It's gone through a whole treatment process first. It's just categorised as raw sewage, and this is it. No, that's not it. That's my lunch. This is it. There we go. So this is from Chiverton. So that don't get them muddled up. So that is raw sewage being dumped on a dry day, okay, from Chiverton. So collected by me, filmed by me. Now that's not clean, okay. When that came out, that was full of bacteria and stuff. But it's that colour, in terms of that's what it actually looks like. So when we hear dry day spill, we hear we hear different things, and sometimes dry day spills are not that colour. Okay, so they are sometimes much darker. But what I'm saying is our biggest dry day spiller that's it. That is what we're talking about, and that is raw sewage being dumped.
How many chemicals are in that?
How many chemicals are in treated sewage is a very good question. So treated sewage has got lots of them in it as well. So let's not just confine this to intermittent discharges. It's treated sewage that is the biggest problem in terms of polluting our watercourses, and we need to actually step up and tackle those things rather than just focusing on the things that sound brown in our heads. So that's maybe...
Yeah, we have had a couple of questions on those chemicals in our water. And I just think I want to make that clear now. So the question asks, are there regulations on the amount of nitrates that can be discharged by water companies, and if not, why not? Where does chemical extraction happen in the sewage treatment works? Pharmaceuticals, cleaning products, bacteria, viruses, forever chemicals and plastics, what happens to them? Does anybody want to pick up on that?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Got Matt's on it.
So treatment works are designed primarily to remove organic matter that breaks down quickly. They are a natural process. They are not designed to break down persistent organic pollutants or inorganic pollutants. So organic means it's carbon-based. You can have persistent organics and you can have inorganics. What sewage works are really good at is moving this stuff from the liquid to the solid. Okay, so if you're getting nasties coming down the sewer and it can't treat them, it's very good at separating out the solid from the liquid. And so the sad reality is a lot of these nasties are ending up in the sludge because they're not being treated. Look, we live in a society where we are doing untold damage to our ecosystem because of our lifestyles, and we haven't even got onto microplastics, PFAS, pharmaceuticals or pesticides. I would suggest that's another topic, but it needs to be addressed because sewage works do not remove these, they move them, and that's a big problem because they don't just disappear.
Yeah.
They just get moved and end up in the environment somewhere else.
But we can all have a choice. If we can and we can afford it, we can go and look at those eco products so that we're not putting chemicals down.
Yeah.
So
It's a lifestyle.
so there's a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
choice.
Sam,
I
do you
totally
want to-
get it, but I think
Yeah.
that is that whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like we can all do something if we can.
Sam, do you want to pick up on that?
You
No, I'm not taking your
you
words
said
from
that. You said it
Maybe
beautifully.
not just a lifestyle choice, maybe it's a responsibility choice.
It's both, isn't it?
I also think that most of these projects should not be on a shelf for people to buy in
Yeah.
the first place.
Yeah.
So
I
it
mean-
comes again back to that point about regulation and legislation, which I think is a bit of a current theme today, isn't it? Being made to do things that we might not want to.
Can I ask a related question?
Of course.
With the cake and the sludge, that then, it's my understanding, it can go onto farmland as fertilizer. There was an organization called the Food and Water Watch in the US that was stating that such processes have resulted in farms being shut down because of the bioaccumulation of PFAS in both crops and in the livestock. My concern is if we are doing the same thing here, at what point and who is looking out, to find out when this is our tipping point for our own food security?
Don't do that one, Tess, or Colin, do you know?
Who's plastic?
Yeah, who's taking the responsibility for monitoring what's going into the ground?
So at the moment there is, the Environment Agency are the regulator, and in terms of the responsibility, there is a group that is convened by Water UK that is looking at exactly that. Now, what our colleagues in government are doing is looking at tightening regulation, and what we're doing in the sector is working out how we're going to deal with that, because you'll appreciate that it's been part of the circular economy for a number of, hundreds of years actually. I mean, we used to barge it out into the sea and dump it, but we don't do that anymore because actually we're more progressive, and there are different grades as well. So the more that we can put through thermal hydrolysis, the better it will be for the industry. But obviously all of our sludge centres don't have thermal hydrolysis. But there is a very big focus on that at the moment because of exactly your challenge, which is, how much of this problem are we sort of moving into a different space? I don't know if you want to build, if I've answered the question fully, Matt, but...
So regulation will come and hopefully clamp down at source. It will mean a change in our lifestyles, and I think we need to wake up to that. Our pharmaceuticals, the things that make us live longer or have fewer headaches, our waterproof coats, the egg that flies around on our saucepan without sticking. The reason our curtains don't go up in flames if someone puts a match to them. These are all chemicals doing this, which sewage works are not designed to ever remove, they just move them. And I think we need to really wake up to that fact that as a society, when I introduced myself, I said I hate people who think they're so clever and have unintended consequences, and I think that's exactly where we're at as a society, is that things like PFAS, pharmaceuticals, pesticides, microplastics, I don't know if you ever think when you change your tyres, where has that tyre gone? Or you change your brakes on your car, where's that metal gone? I know where it's gone. And these are really difficult decisions because we're now invading people's choice and saying, sorry, but, and we haven't really got the strong government leadership that's prepared to upset people. Maybe we have now, I don't know.
Time will tell.
We wait and see. But there's it's a fantastic question because there's no easy answers. It really needs some people who really understand this and believe in it, and to really steer our nation down the right route, because we're polluting it like crazy.
Did you have questions for you?
It was similar, it was just who deals with the sludge and where does it go?
So the sludge, we take the energy out generally through digestion, so we try and get some of the organic compounds to break down to produce methane, and we either burn the methane to produce electricity or we inject it into the national grid. And then we're left with a nutrient-rich fertiliser, which is currently sold to farmers, but the problem is all the nasties are also condensed in it. So your heavy metals...
All the plastics and metals.
Yeah, a lot of the microplastics. And so we are merrily spreading it on our farmland and growing crops on it. And it's not sustainable because this stuff is UPBT, ubiquitous, persistent, bioaccumulative and toxic. And we've got to make some difficult decisions to tackle that.
Sadly, a good many of the farms in Britain are doing their best anyway to cover their land with pesticides and inorganic fertilisers that are unhelpful, and herbicides that are full of poisons and so on. So it's not just yourselves.
Comes back to legislation though again, doesn't it?
It does.
Gentleman there in the...
Sorry,
Hello.
I can't sit here.
No, that's absolutely fine.
Well,
It's very organic today, so
for
please
for
jump
any
in.
longer. I used to be a high-level water engineer until 1984, and I took up a voluntary role then. In 1984, this man sitting next to me introduced a proprietary reed bed method that has been kept out of the water industry diligently. He treated all the waste at ICI Billingham, the source of many of the chemicals you're saying that can't be taken out of the water. He's done it by sequestrating 17,000 tonnes of carbon in the last 30 years. The answers are there. They have been suppressed and kept at arm's length by a variety of organisations, some of whom I'll name. WRC, that used to be the public guardian of water technology, it was privatised. It was sold to the water companies. They had no interest in cheap solutions. I originated SUDS in this country. I demonstrated the first one in 1991 on BBC TV. I followed that up with the first catchment-based proposal in 1993. Do you think we get involved in any of the planning processes? So Ash is absolutely right when he says the vast majority of reed beds are pretty poor. They are, because they're plagiarised. The originators are kept out. And you know, we're not looking to be heroes or anything like that. But this is a very deep rabbit hole that this event has made a very important start in discussing, and the other great work that's going on. But the low-cost solutions do exist. The public has to get involved, though. As I said earlier, we need a properly designed reed bed on every street corner, basically. We have to replace all those thousands of overflows with some form of treatment. And yes, antimicrobial resistance can be resolved in a reed bed very safely. And so on and so on, all these awful toxins. He's done it. He treats oil waste in Sudan, the most contaminated wastewater around, to drinking water standards. There's millions of people in Africa that depend on his technology. It's all been kept from you in the UK.
Well, Tess, do you want to pick that up? I know, in fact, Angus and I went just a couple of weeks ago to the sewage treatment works in Shorncott and had a good walk around the nascent reed beds. So do you want to pick that up about the work that you're doing? I know Wessex have got some reed beds you're going to reintroduce in Tetbury, so do we?
I mean, we met over lunch, so I can't comment because the depth of my understanding is from our conversation. And I think it's just interesting to uncover the concerns that you have about some of the technologies that are being adopted and whether or not there's other opportunities, hence the reason why we're potentially going to connect after this. But I think the big thing for us is, as we said earlier, we want to find nature-based solutions to some of our challenges, because the last thing we want to do is to continue to invest in grey solutions, which ultimately come with quite a large carbon price. So I think that is a very big theme running through our investment plan as we go forward. And I have to just take feedback as to whether or not what we have installed is appropriate. But I've also had some feedback that our Burford works could be better. So thank you.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to hear, and one of the reasons I'm here today is so that I can hear the feedback from this community, and particularly sort of just understand some of these local issues. So I appreciate that.
Tess, I've often heard the comparison of the carbon footprint of a grey solution to a nature-based solution. What are the figures?
Well, I don't have specifics because I haven't got that in my preparation pack. But I bet Matt knows.
Oh, nicely done.
Put you on the spot, Matt. So Matt, reed beds in Tetbury, the carbon footprint of...
Sorry, we have got the data. It was introduced in 1984. The carbon footprint and the installation cost is 90% less than electromechanical treatment. 90% less, whilst sequestrating carbon.
Of your type of reed bed?
Of Professor Lucian Gill's type.
Yeah.
A soil, not a gravel aggregate.
Yeah.
You can only get the correct chemistry and microbiology with soil. You can't with gravel.
So for the water industry version, do we have any figures?
I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but what is really interesting when you're measuring carbon is understanding the full life cycle of the water, and the fact that someone that is able, rainwater that's not getting into the sewer but captured and reused means we're not demanding the water from 40 miles away at unequal water treatment works. So by inspection, and water's heavy. You know, we forget every cubic metre weighs a tonne. You're using twice your body weight a day in water, roughly. That has to be shifted, I don't know, 70 metres in the air. I don't know if you've ever tried lifting 10 kilograms of water up the stairs. I mean, there's a huge amount of energy going into it. And then you're giving us so much more rain as well to treat. So the more we can reduce the amount we consume and the amount we give the water companies, the lower everyone's carbon footprint. But it's the difficulty with doing it, which I alluded to some of them earlier, is that the progressive nature of managing rainwater better does not tick some of the regulatory boxes for wanting instant outputs. And that's what we've got to address. If we want better solutions, we've got to have a regulation approach that measures the outcome but values the inputs and doesn't just measure just a number of discharges, because what matters is the environment and how we achieve that goal, not just big storage tanks.
So I have a series of questions that relate to aspects of monitoring and testing that go to that. Some of these relate to the regulation, as you've just been talking about. And you may have a point of view about what kind of regulation is needed. We've heard from our new MP that she's open to hearing about that sort of thing. But at the same time, obviously, the question applies also specifically to the Environment Agency and water companies. So some of the questions, I'm just going to try and build them into a related series. It's important to know what's actually happening, but sometimes the way in which the measurement is being done doesn't give enough precision and granularity about what is really going on and the outcome. Can we improve that? Can we not expect that the Environment Agency would be more active in, first of all, doing its own monitoring and regulation, but might it also ask the water companies to be doing more monitoring and regulation at the point where they are discharging, so that they have a requirement to actually specify the quality of what they're doing on a continuous basis? Should they not be more involved in actually communicating that? So there are questions that are related there. So can we get water companies to test quality better? Can the Environment Agency get more active in doing it? Can we find better ways of actually measuring the quality of water that provide us with a better, more clear picture, both the public, the regulators and the doers, in order to be able to manage this more effectively? What are your views?
So just to kick off, water companies are required to carry out their own monitoring, or operator self-monitoring, so they do that. There are...
I think the question implied that it wasn't necessarily being done as much as it could or should be.
And who's making sure that they are doing their monitoring?
It's not fulfilling the Environmental Act, which is insisting that you monitor upstream and downstream of all your sewage treatment works. You're saying you're doing that?
No,
Let's let everybody answer.
Probably soon, though.
Sorry.
Colin hasn't reached that point.
Yeah.
So there is a current requirement to do monitoring. There are questions have been raised about the value of operator self-monitoring, and that needs to be explored further, and that's both pointed at water companies and the Environment Agency. So it does happen. We do take samples, less than we used to, quite a lot less than we used to, and that is a function of funding, and that is a political direction. So that is that. There is going to be requirements for more monitoring to be carried out by water companies, and as alluded to, upstream and downstream, absolutely. There is the requirement for the monitoring for spills, and again, that is based on an hourly basis. Question marks, should that be a volume as well, so that there is a different quantification about what is the volume that's going out versus a number of hours, and that will then, you can do some more work to determine what the receiving river impact could be, because this is historic derivation about what is protecting the environment, many years ago, and modelling perhaps should be then looked at is to determine what the volume is, the duration is, and yes, it will still be a dilute pollutant, because I think everybody needs to recognise that when we issue a permit, are there to minimise the impact to the environment. We're not saying that there will be no impact. What direction the government has said that is a level which is acceptable for society. So that is sort of from an Environment Agency perspective as to where we're at monitoring.
While you're up, part of that question was about the Environment Agency itself stepping up its monitoring activity and whatever might be needed to make that happen.
Well, we're certainly stepping up in terms of doing compliance work, not necessarily doing scientific analysis. And that was from a commitment before July the 4th, where more money was provided to the Environment Agency to increase the numbers of people to go out there and do water company compliance work. So that, again, compliance is directly attributable to money. That money has been put onto water companies for their discharge consents. So in fact, the water companies are now paying the Environment Agency more for us to go out more and employ more people. But it's a politically driven issue. So we can only do what we can do with what we're given.
So the suggestion is that it could be better, perhaps should be better. You're doing all that's available within the resources, if I understood you right.
Yeah.
Can I add a bit to that? So we had a deregulatory government. I think Colin's alluded to that, and it meant that pollution has been kept profitable. So what the agency's been able to do and the rules that they have to work under for their prosecutions and sanctions policy means that most of the time they don't even attend an event. They can't, they don't. And when they do, they will then only prosecute the tiniest fraction of offences. Example, Thames Water got fined £20 million in 2017. That equated to 2.4% of the money they made by polluting over the years of pollution. It was like processing it through PayPal. So pollution is profitable, and if that doesn't change, then the water industry behaviour doesn't change, because that is the profitable way to conduct the business. It doesn't matter that it's illegal, because no one else takes the blame. Either they have to change that, in which case more money will have to be spent, the water industries, the companies may go broke, or they start to look at the conduct of the senior executives and chief executives, because that's what happens in the waste industry. Those people get custodial sentences for doing exactly what chief executives of water companies have been doing, breaking environmental permits. So that is the fundamental issue around regulation, and that will then give the Environment Agency the sort of teeth it needs, and then it will need some heavy duty support from the top, which it's not had up until now.
Thanks, Ash. Sarah Jane, we haven't heard much from you. Well, what's happening at Severn and Trent then? I know that you've had been monitoring what's happening with your data maps and any fines. Do you want to make a comment on any of that?
So the data maps are all there. You can go have a look, and it will show you exactly what's happening. We've to check that data is accurate and the monitors are working the way that they're meant to be working. We've got a bit of a crazy scheme internally where every member of Severn has been asked to adopt an outfall. Are you doing that, Jayne?
Yeah.
So every member of staff has got their own personal overflow that we go and check and make sure, is it actually spilling when we say it's spilling? Is it spilling when we say it's not spilling? Is it not spilling when we say it's spilling? Just to make sure that everything is working as best that it can. And obviously this is all new stuff to us, so beginning of a journey, and we will work really hard to make sure it's accurate.
I guess it just feels perhaps from a public point of view that we're sort of asking the poacher to count the amount of partridges he's killed overnight and sort of be really honest. And I think from the room we might feel that that means perhaps we don't have enough faith in these systems to know that what is being declared is actually accurate and that it is being picked up and then...
So Thames Water, when we said this to Thames Water, and they put CCTV in at Burford because we didn't believe that thing was not spilling, and indeed it did pick up spills that weren't recorded. And it's very easy. I mean, they spend a ridiculous amount of money to do it, at like 1,500 quid. We can do it for about £160. So it could be done really easily, and it just isn't.
So is your question?
Yes, we're working with an IT systems provider who've developed a system for using open source satellite data to look at water pollution. So it can provide a real-time diagnostic of up to 600 water pollutants continuously, throughout the country. The irony is, it doesn't look like it's going to see the light of day because nobody's interested in knowing it. So it can't be commercialised because what would you do? Who would be willing to pay for that information? Because they'll be on the hook for it. So I'm just curious to know from the panel whether they see that there is a future for technology that has that level of detail, or whether you're going to rely on people and waders and dipping water in and doing colour charts.
Matt, do you want to pick that up?
Well, yeah, so just to answer the gentleman behind you's question, who said we're going to be doing upstream and downstream monitoring. So part of the Environment Act, Section 82, is all about putting in monitoring upstream and downstream at every point discharge, be it from continuous discharge sewage from the sewage works or from a storm overflow. So that will be measuring in river pH, dissolved oxygen, ammonium turbidity, conductivity, I think. So that will actually give you measured impact. So I guess
the problem is, Matt, excuse me, but again, the problem is the time lag.
Yeah.
You're already behind the schedule. You're already breaking.
We're ahead of the schedule. We're ahead of the schedule.
You're ahead of the schedule.
Yeah. We're ahead of
that must be Wessex. Well done.
Well, no, the schedule hasn't started yet. So everyone's ahead of the schedule because the schedule hasn't started yet.
I don't like the use of the word "will." That's all. When you say "we will be."
Yes,
it's because it's in our AMP8 plan.
It's part of. So it's part of the planning process required under the Environment Act. So. We will be ahead of. We are ahead of the schedule, and we will be ahead of the schedule. But my point is, this is a step. This is good measurement, because this is saying what. So what? What is the impact? This is really good. The event duration monitoring on the overflows. Just so that you're aware, England and Wales are the only country with 100% monitoring. Denmark, 7% monitoring of overflows. Just so it's out there. Scotland, 4%. England and Wales 100%. So what it's done is it's generated information that we are now able to act on. But I would say that the in-river water quality monitoring is far more important because that is measuring the outcome. Now, I don't actually think we're measuring the right things because the biggest pollutant is nutrients and the biggest public health concern is bacteria, neither of which are being measured by the upstream-downstream monitoring. But that, again, that's someone else's decision. I think there are opportunities to use those easier to measure things, to infer things like nutrients and bacteria, and we've been developing that place where I swim, where we've been able to predict bacteria numbers by measuring those other parameters. I think there's a great opportunity for AI and other tools to use the data we're going to be gathering to help us assess some of those really important other pollutants like phosphorus and nitrates, and etc., etc.
Ash, did you want to come in?
Just take up that point about being ahead of schedule, and I appreciate you may well be ahead of this schedule, but in 2018 the guidance was redone for the water industry to classify and rectify its storm overflows and to identify those that were satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or some other word. They were then due to fix those unsatisfactory overflows within 3 years, generally within 3 years, in accordance with their wastewater management plans. They didn't do it. They chose not to do it. And they'd chosen not to do it before that, because I think it originated in 2014 or even 2004, that requirement. And they would say, and the excuse given by the industry and the Environment Agency was that this guidance was not statutory, which of course is nonsense, because it's like saying that the guidance to tax your car is not statutory, but you have to tax your car. And these requirements were to do things like don't pollute shellfish waters to damage the shellfish waters, don't spill due to groundwater infiltration, don't do dry spilling, things that were illegal, but they chose to ignore it. And they like to reset it. Then we had the storm overflow assessment framework. That was meant to classify 60 overflows as being unsatisfactory, going down 50 and 40 over the following years. And I asked, 4 years on into that programme, how many things have been fixed under the storm overflows assessment framework? I asked the Environment Agency, and the answer was, and I'm asking for a guess from the audience, none. None whatsoever. So we just keep getting a different set of plans. Fail to achieve a plan, start another plan. It's classic, and the water industry is brilliant at it. And we hope that that's all changed. And I know there's a lot of positive energy here. There are a lot of professional people here. I've got a lot of respect for them. But the water industry, as in the big bosses at the top, do this, and they play this game over and over again. And we sit there and we lap it up. And it's time we stop lapping it up.
Well, on that note,
Does anyone have a response?
I don't,
Well,
it's not criticism of you.
yeah, no.
It's just reality.
Yeah, I think if you understand the procedures that follow through for delivery, so you're referring to the storm overflow assessment framework, which is
I was, but I was referring to the guidance.
Yeah.
The 2018, that was a reset of guidance. And I forget when it originated, but I think it was 2014 or before.
I think it's worth saying that it's not just members of the public that have been shocked by how often storm overflows operate, right? Looking at my water company colleagues, we've been taken back by it. Changing the national infrastructure is not a quick fix, and which is why I come back to, and therefore we need to actually try and fix it in the right way. So we're acknowledging the problem. But what we're not saying is we can do everything quickly. Because if we're talking about changing the nation's infrastructure, rather than just building cheap storage tanks, then we've got to do things in the right way and engage more people. So it's not a case of, and Ashely, you've never been to our board meetings, so but
is that an invitation?
Sadly, I'm not able to extend that invite, but I'm sure if I was able
Sure,
to,
you can take that back, Matt.
I will. I'll take that back.
Perhaps Ash should be invited.
But actually, you've got a group of people who are very passionate about the water industry, about the environment, and about how their roles in the water industry. And I think there's been, there's always two sides to every story, isn't there? We hear one side, and we rarely hear the other side. And there's a lot of, there are a lot of partial truths out there that members of the public don't hear the other side too. And for those of us who work in the water sector who are passionate about it, it's quite hard work, believe me. I thought of leaving lots of times because I'm getting fed up with it. I want to make a difference, and that's why I'm staying in there. But I can't do it. I need people like Ash to keep us, keep prodding. But I also need other people to start directing. And when I say other people, I mean those in authority and power over the whole of the regime, be it the regulators, be it the companies.
Yeah.
So looking at solutions, I know there's lots and lots of things. We've got some specific questions, haven't we, about...
So we have some questions that relate, since we are the district council and we have responsibility for planning, there's a series of questions that have some relationship to that. So I'd like to ask you about them. We're already in a situation where in the present framework we have to build a lot more houses in the years ahead. And we're already in a framework where there are developments taking place. And there's a series of questions that relate to this, specifically the ones that already exist for Amberley St Peters, for Siddington, for Moreton, for example.
Fairford.
So there are these developments already, and we've already heard that the government wants to build millions more houses. So the numbers are only going to go up, most likely. But we're in a situation where we have been getting approval from the water companies that they were able to cope with the volume of activity of the housing that was being planned, even though in practice, these are the questions are saying, it hasn't turned out like that. And with further development, that is only going to potentially become more extreme. And one option might be that it could be a complete block on being able to do the development that we are required to do. Matt is there trying to develop an area plan which requires infrastructure in place. So the question, and I'm sorry to say that quite a number of them do actually focus Thames Water.
But you are the biggest water company.
What the questions really ask, why are you approving the ability to do things when you're demonstrably not? What are you doing to turn things around so you will demonstrably be able to cope with the already existing development plans and the essential plans that will be coming along?
So I guess the first thing to say is that each and every instance of demand will be run through models that are far too comprehensive for me to understand through our asset investment team. Oh, sorry.
Can you speak up?
I can. It's unusual that I'm asked to speak up.
Can I minute that?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Are those financial models, or are they some other?
They're planning models, so they're to do with sort of planning and capacity. And the financial modelling comes later. So
Tess, can I just jump in there? Can you make it clear? But I think just for the room, it's really, really important to know at what point you classify running the model to be appropriate. So at what number of houses? Because literally here we think one more house, one planning application. But so can you just tell us what the sort of gradation is there for the amount of homes that are?
So I am not a planning specialist, so I can't actually answer that truthfully. I don't know, Jake, whether you know.
Say again.
How many houses will you before you look at a planning application?
Well, John explained it was 10, over 10. So again, he's explained it in our monthly sessions that that incremental growth is obviously a killer. This small team, they will look at plans that obviously specify over 10. We have a hit list of places that we know are problem areas. I guess say areas that are reaching high capacity or close to capacity or even exceeding beyond it. We now, again, we're not afraid to say we do not have the capacity either in the system or going to our treatment works. We will respond back to that planning application. If there are previous ones that you think we need to have a look at again, where we've not quite got it right, we've always said that we'd look on an individual basis and look at the numbers behind it. I do believe we have responded on a couple that way, and it has come back affirmative that obviously we don't have that capacity. Moving forward, we'll have to have a look at what's coming down through that local plan. As much information as we get earlier to those planning teams, again, it will filter down to our assessment models and go through to explain what we need to do it works.
So to be clear, what I'm hearing, I think, is that the local authority of the planning district relies on Thames Water to say whether a development of over 10 properties can go ahead, whether they have capacity for it, even though the data shows that they're failing to manage the water that they're dealing with right
Slightly
now.
more complex than that, unfortunately.
Matt to answer?
So we aren't a statutory consultee, so we can provide a view, but ultimately we'll be relying on our colleagues in the decision-making authorities to be deciding whether or not those houses are then implemented with potential rights assigned to them in some cases. So,
but I guess my point was, so the planning, the district needs to make its own decision on whether it just doesn't seem to make sense.
Matt, do you want to come in on this?
So when each year we provide water infrastructure companies with a projection of houses that are going to be delivered in an area. And we know that from what's already got planning permission. And then we also do the same with our local plan about when sites are coming through the system. And then
we have allocated sites within our local plan.
So so we're supposed to be able to target to 2041, and we have to sort of find sites across the district to meet that target, and we can sort of let the water infrastructure companies know as soon as possible like where those sites are, so they can sort of start to think about the capacity improvements that might be required. And then,
But bear in mind that we don't have control over when those developers will put the planning application in. We don't own the land, or we don't, you know, we don't make the plans. We don't control when planning applications come in.
So as much as possible, we can sort of tell them, well, this is like what the level, the number of planning permissions that we have on books already. These are the sites that we think are going to come forward in the future, so they can start to work out what the capacity requirements are. But then, when it comes down to the individual planning applications, what we're hearing here is like, it's only like the sites that are 10 or more that they have the capacity to sort of look at. But they'll know, like, you know, those ones and twos that sort of build up. We'll let them know when they come through, like the following year, that we've had another 10 here, and therefore you've got to take them into account. So it's not like they're just being fallen by the wayside, because we keep providing them with an annual update. But actually, in terms of the capacity assessment that's going on, it would be 10 or more houses. So when we do consult them on those applications, we'll get a response back to say, yay or nay, you know, we've got the capacity in the system, or not, or you're going to have to find a different way of dealing with the wastewater treatment or the network capacity in that application. And it might be that actually, there's a condition that's required on the planning application, which says, well, that can go ahead, that planning application, but not until it can't be occupied until the infrastructure is in place. So that will delay that site being occupied.
Except it sounds like it doesn't.
Well.
But the other thing, I think this, we know that the water companies are technically statutory consultees. What will happen though if everything else was fine in that planning application for 11 houses, and CD and Thames Water have said, oh, everything is fine, it'll all work, and yet, you know, we know that local people say, well, actually, in some Cairns, we know that there's an issue there and we can't do it. If we then, as a local authority, go back and refuse that planning based on local knowledge, it will most likely be appealed, go to the planning inspectorate, at which point you, Hilary, who've done such a fantastic job of, you know, creating your wonderful flooding report, might not stand up against the developers, barristers, lawyers, flood experts, sewage drainage officers, blah blah blah, who spent tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of pounds creating all of these things, and then we as local authority go, yeah, but Hilary in Sumford says it's really bad and there was definitely sewage coming into the river there, and funnily enough, it gets overturned on appeal.
Lisa, can I take
and Ash, sorry, you want to just come in?
So, planning authorities were allowed to take the word of the sewerage provider. There was a decision made up in the northeast by an environmental group up there where they got advice from a QC at the time who said, yes, they can, the law says that they can take the advice of the provider, but they don't have to. That was critical. That's what brought this whole thing in. That's why we've developed this thing with the planning authorities, because it's not a question of whether person X thinks there's some sewage going in. There's data and there's hard evidence to show that sewage works are operating outside their capacity, and that's what WASP provides. It's not just a guess that there's a bit of pollution here. It is absolute proof. And one of the best examples is what happened at Oxford, and the Environment Agency did a very good job of that. In objecting to that planning, where Thames Water said, yes, we'll take 1,400 houses and the money that comes with it. And they knew that was not the case, they couldn't do that. And we've got plenty of examples where they continue to do that, and we know that you don't have to make a calculation each time, and you don't have to say, okay, 9 houses, let's just keep applying for 9 houses until we've got to 1,000, and they won't even get assessed. You don't have to do that. You can already declare to the planning authority, in this area, at the moment, sewage works A to Z are operating outside their capacity. I think you've already got that list, the red list of places. So you don't have to go through this charade. And one extra house to an illegally operating sewage works is illegal. That's it.
Going back to that point, again, on review, we will go back and ask for that condition to be stuck on to the planning application. It's then up to the local planning authority to hold that granular and that phasing plan to its nth degree. And that's all I'll say on that point, really.
Thank you. Jan?
Well, can I just ask the panel collectively, this comes up time and again, and it's not just the small developments, it's the large developments, of which we've got two on the outskirts of Cirencester. One is the Steading, and one is the massive great village, town village, which has got a huge storage system being installed, because Thames Water cannot take the foul water from that without it being in this massive storage system before it even enters the system. I don't think many of you are actually aware of those plans being through. My point to the whole of you is, what needs to happen at the government level so that there is a better integration when new housing schemes are considered, particularly the larger ones, for any provision of water, but as we're here today discussing sewage, how we deal with foul water. Because at the moment, there seems a complete lack of cohesion between local plan, development plans, the requirements of the water authorities, whether it's statutory or not, and it may be hampered by the fact that you are private, so-called private companies, and that there is no requirement at government level that I can see imposed upon any of you to work together in a realistic way to say, look, we want X amount of houses. The government are proposing 1.5 million in the next year. The population is growing at an exponential rate. A huge amount of housing is going to be needed. And we cannot carry on with this chaotic system of, you're not statutory consultees, even then you may not give a clear answer that is absolutely accurate in the eyes of others. And yet there is no statutory requirement for everybody to come together and provide a cohesive solution. So to all of the panel, what would you propose for this new government going forward should happen?
Shall start from this end and you can all have an input.
The first
I think that's a really good, really good point.
I'll get the first easy one. Enact Schedule 3 of the Floods and Water Management Act. Enact Schedule 3 of the Floods and Water Management Act, which came in place in 2010. Has not been enacted. No. What that will do is that will provide a mandatory requirement for SUDs for every single property, regardless, well, above the development of 2 or more houses. We would want it down at every single house. Because what that will do is it will slow the rain down, and then you remove the right to connect, it keeps it away from the sewage. So then, once you've done that, then you're just dealing with the foul water. Okay, if we can deal with, remember the quantities, one roof equals 100 properties. So if you've got a sewage works that's over capacity due to rain, because every time it rains it overflows, then you could build 100 new houses, remove one existing roof, and you're at status quo. Now, what you will have done is you'll increase the organic load, but you'll have reduced the peak flow rate. So it comes back to what my talk was all about, is if we manage rainwater, it makes all the other things so much easier to deal with, because you're not dealing with these massive peaks when it rains.
Colin.
How much rain do you need to make that one roof create 100 houses?
So as I said in my talk, that's based on a 1-year event. So we've just taken a 1-year, 1-hour event, will generate the same flow as 100 properties. So you have to measure rain in 2 dimensions.
Can I just say, but SUDs are, I know they're not mandatory, but I know that this scheme had SUDs, and I suspect the Steading scheme has SUDs and balancing. We are doing that in Cotswold district already, as far as I'm aware. All large schemes have SUDs. I know it's not statutory, but the majority of them have. I think I'm right.
Brilliant.
Colin, do you want to give your
I'm going to
input?
I'm going to take the 5th here.
Okay.
It's not for the Environment Agency to lobby government.
No. Okay, fine. But working together, you know, I think it was about, you know, how do we all work together to solve a solution?
We will do that, but we can't. We're not. It's not our role.
What do you suggest we could do to lobby government?
Or work better together.
I think it's listen to the outputs from today, and I think you've probably got an awful lot there which will provide some focus about what are the key things that could make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Ash.
Well, you take the Oxford example and you say, okay, the infrastructure has been broken by the water company has to fix that. It's going to hurt. But if you continue with that and you allow those extra houses to be built and you allow the sewers to be spilling out up into the streets, as is happening, as will happen, people will get sick from that. We already know the public health risk. This will not be so easily brushed aside in a coroner's court or a Crown Court if somebody dies. And people have already died from sewage contamination, let's be really clear about that. So a proper enforcement of the law and a recognition that it should never have been allowed to get this far. The water industry has been privatised since 1989. These are not new things. These things have been allowed to develop, and you cannot, with that case at Oxford, we know that there's some decisions will be made because that was referred to Michael Gove before he left, and that's the information I'd received. And so that is really troubling government, because that is blocking all. It's really inconvenient, and they're going to have to find a rapid way to deal with it and inject money into fixing it. So it's a hard thing. You can't just say, well, there's hope it gets better. Someone's going to have to take some pain for this, and it should be the water company shareholders who benefited out of creating that shambles.
But Ash, didn't you just say from earlier on that depended on you having good quality data in the first place?
Yeah.
That you've done at Oxford.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily going to be the case everywhere, is it?
It's pretty much everywhere. It's not difficult.
Okay.
Peter's done it. Sam.
I mean, I wish I had a good answer.
Magic wand?
Yeah, a magic wand. I think now that we've got a new, energetic government that wants to stop all this, they've been campaigning and giving us all the right lines. We need to actually explain to them what the problem is, what the solutions are, and make them really understand what this problem is, so that they can fix it.
Thank you. Sarah Jane.
I would like to see us think more carefully about where developments go. So not just from a sewerage point of view, but also from a water resources point of view. We have to think really carefully when somebody comes along and says, we want to build 150 new houses or 1,500 new houses. Not only have we got to worry about how we're going to deal with surface water and foul water, we've also got to worry about, have we actually got enough clean water to supply them? And we've had in the last couple of months massive industrial customers come to us and say, we want 8 meg a day, 8 million litres a day, please. And we're kind of like, okay, where are we going to find that from? So I would like to see us think really careful about where we're putting that development, and not only is the sewage system up to capacity, but is it in the right place to supply them with the clean water in the first place?
Tessa.
Well, I can't help but agree with my learning colleagues, actually. I think, we've heard a lot today about how some relatively straightforward changes that are already available in legislation, if they could be enacted, I'd have to also throw in it would be useful if we were statutory consultees, because what I do appreciate is that we in the Oxford situation, we've now created a more complicated situation, because our colleagues in the Environment Agency have blocked that because of what we are or are not doing, and that is creating quite a political maelstrom. If you could just blame us, that'd be easy, because everyone else does, why not? But I do think that would be quite helpful, because then ultimately, we would have a stronger voice in that discussion and that debate, and then we could hold ourselves to account for decisions we do or do not make. So that's my only build on what's been said today.
Thank you. Well, everyone. Oh, yes.
I would say, bring it back to the point about how do we solve this issue about planning and obviously infrastructure that's meeting its peak, is information sharing. And I'll self-plug here, we have monthly meetings, as I started off with West Oxfordshire, which has kind of kicked off this whole idea about thinking about the planning system in this equation. Because ultimately, as far as I can remember, Waterways Day 21, 20 and 22, sorry, not 20 because that was COVID year, but this wasn't thought about. This is a really, really important piece of the puzzle that we have to get correct. And like I said, having people like myself who engage with the local government, local districts, I don't know about how my other water company colleagues think about this, or whether they even have these types of people engaging with the local district councils, keeping each other true to the point where we are literally meeting each other month upon month, exchange of information as quick as possible, keeping the lines open between specific offices within the water companies and the districts. These are all the ways that we're going to get through a very difficult time and very difficult conversations.
I think that has been very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you everyone. We could go on and on, we've got many other questions. I'm sorry if I haven't got around to answering or asking the question that you specifically wanted to ask. The slides from everybody's presentation will be available on our website. The Q&A has been filmed, that will also go onto our website. If anybody wants any further information or to hook up or to ask any other specific questions, you can send them to Phil Martin. Or to me, and we'll make sure that your question gets disseminated to the right person. And I'm sure that all of the panel here, thank you very much for all your time, for your presentations, for your honest truthfulness in coming here today from a challenging environment and being able to respond in that way, like Jake said and Angus said. We really hope that by working together, as Jan said, that we will be able to find a way forward in all of this to make Cotswold District a really fantastic, or continue to be a very, very fantastic place to live and work. So with that, I'd like to conclude today's events. Thank you. Any feedback, then let us know. We will be doing more of these kinds of things and looking potentially at other issues around water, so that's water quality itself and water supply, I think, as well as one of those big things that is going to come and hit us and be really, really important as we move forward. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you found this a useful event. Thanks.